Wanted to thank everyone for coming today. I'm Sarah Snyder, your conference treasurer. And Don and I have been doing this for a couple of years together. Don has been our statistician for a while, and we'll tell you more about that. And also why doing the statistical reports are so important. But I want to thank you. Some of you are paid employees, and some of you have been doing this for years as a volunteer. And we thank you very much for your time and energy that you devote to this. So we will be recording the session, and we will be posting it to the finance section of our webpage under the training area. So if you have anyone else in your church that would like to see it, we'll probably have it up there by Monday, along with the handout or a copy of the slides. So I'll just let Don take it over from here.
Thanks. Just to make sure you can see my slides, we're sharing it, it's full screen and everything, correct, Sarah?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. My name is Don Kramer, and I'm the statistician for the Wisconsin Annual Conference. I've been doing this for about 10 years now. I'm going to go through what we're hoping that you guys will be able to complete in the next couple of weeks so that we can hand our data up to the general conference. So I'm a layperson at Milwaukee Central. My contact information there, the best way to contact me is by email. During the day, I'm usually working. I don't work for the conference. So if you try to call me during working hours, I'll be at my other job. If you do need to call someone, the best people are the office staff in Sun Prairie. The best way to contact them is those email addresses and the phone number that's on the screen there. Let's see. Today, I've got 3 objectives for us. I want to convince you all that accurate 2022 data is important. I want to introduce the new data collection system. We're no longer using Ezra for 2022. And I want to address some common mistakes and questions that we see on a regular basis. I also want to answer any questions that you all have today. Right. So first thing, I want to go through why the data is important and why we do this. And actually, part of that is also the timeline for it. In January, currently, I need to update this. The AC Stats is no longer Ezra. AC Stats is available for you to enter your 2022 data. And so we usually recommend that people go and they log in and print out a blank form. It's much easier, you know, a lot of people just find it easier if they're working with a paper copy of information, filling that in, and then coming back to the system later and entering it in electronically. But going in first, making sure that you can log in, making sure that you can access those forms, print out those blank forms. And the blank forms also show you what you entered last year. So that's usually pretty helpful to have a comparison of what was entered last year for your church to see what this year's numbers will look like. The deadline for you to submit your data is February 28th. We ask you to start early. We always get some last minute panicky people at the end of February. Start early. You never know what might come up as the month progresses. During March and April, that's when I go through and I do all sorts of checks for warnings and errors, just making sure that the data looks correct, because then at the end of April, I have to submit all of Wisconsin's data to the General Conference Finance and Administrative Board. Right. Then during the summer, they look through our data, they look for errors. They often come back to me with questions and concerns that they have about the data that I've submitted. Because they usually have questions, they usually open the data back up and I'm able then to make some changes. So if after the deadline you realize that you made some mistake, please let me know. And then there's usually a window during the summer that I can make changes and updates to local churches. Then by fall of next year, we use that 2022 data to calculate the 2024 apportionments. All right. So that's sort of the timeline of how all of this data gets used. Right. We really use this data for 2 reasons. We analyze trends and we allocate resources. So by analyzing trends, you know, the big ones people look at is membership numbers, assets, and incomes. And just a little bit of that. This conference, the Wisconsin Conference has about 49,826 members as of the end of 2021, we saw that that was a 4% decrease from the previous year. Our property values from all the local churches, adding it up, it was about valued at $893 million, which was a 4% increase from the prior year. And if we looked at budgeted income within the local churches, it was about 53 million, which was a slight increase from the previous years. So just some of those trends that we might look at year to year and see how things are moving. We also use the data to allocate resources. This is obviously through apportionments is the one people think of most often, but also clergy assignments. And I'm really thinking big picture there. When the jurisdiction is looking to assign bishops and seeing which conferences share bishops, they look at the data and look at the membership numbers and church numbers. And that all comes local churches submitting that data and it going up through conferences and jurisdictions and to the general board, right? Along those lines, the North Central jurisdiction, which Wisconsin's a part of, they're sharing their data. This is from 2020. That's the latest that they've shared. These numbers, we can see all of our local conferences, the number of churches they have, the number of members they have, what's their average attendance. This is all coming from local churches submitting data and it being compiled. So every number that's on here is came from someone submitting it, someone like you submitting your local church. You can see Wisconsin's down at the bottom there. We're one of the smaller conferences in 2020, we had 457 churches and about 52,000 members, right? And about 1 million members for the whole jurisdiction. Right, so just sharing this for sake of showing why it's important what you're doing on a local level, how it all gets compiled for larger numbers. Also, I just find this interesting, and as a stats guy, I'm sort of biased, but just seeing the breakdown of Wisconsin from 2021, we had about 445 churches. They get distributed pretty evenly amongst the 5 districts: North Central, Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, and Southwest. And the membership at about 50,000, you can see how that's distributed. And then let's see, looking at the next slide, we have an actual graph of it, which usually shows, the churches are, do look pretty evenly distributed amongst the districts. But then once you start looking at like how the membership is distributed, you can see the sizes are a little bit different district by district. But again, this information, we only have it because of local individuals giving us the information about their churches. All right. Finally, talking about how we use the data, the apportionment calculation uses these specific lines in the stats program. So the apportionment calculation uses membership, specifically lines 1 through 4. So those are the lines that talk about total members, but also like births, deaths, transfers in, transfers out. So those are numbers to really focus on and make sure that you get them accurate. And then finally, the expenses, specifically staff compensation and benefits, program expenses, and then operating expenses. So those lines there are the ones that are used for the apportionments. And I don't want to say some lines are more important than others, but these are the ones that, if you make mistakes on them, we usually then have to go back and correct them because they're part of the apportionment calculation. All right, so next thing, we've got a new program to collect data this year. Previous years was Ezra. We're no longer using Ezra. The program this year is called AC Stats, and it's new to all of us. So I'm going to tell you some things that I've been told, but some of these I haven't actually experienced yet. So there might be some learning curves. We might be learning some things together this year. So please give us some grace when you're asking us questions, because we might be figuring out things for the first time also. However, first time to log into AC Stats, there's 2 ways to do it. You're either going to do it through your church dashboard, and I've heard that there should have been a button that appears on your church dashboard, and this is specifically for those of you that are already using the church dashboard, such as church administrators and pastors that are already familiar with that.
Dawn?
Yeah.
This is Lisa Wink. I just wanted to let them know if you are using your church dashboard, it is in the upper right-hand corner of the dashboard and it says quick link to AC stats.
Cool. Very straightforward.
Yep.
And then if you don't have access to your church dashboard, I know at my church I don't. The other method is to go to the website stats.gcfa.org. And that tends to be the way that people are going to use it if you're not familiar with the dashboard. And in that, to sign in that way, you're going to use the way we used to. You'll use your 6-digit GCNO, your general conference number, and your password. We've reset it for everyone this year to be stats 2022. Okay. So if you don't have access to your church dashboard, you're going to use that second method. Sarah?
A third method is to go to the first page of the conference webpage, and Lisa has set up a link there. And so you can click it on the AC stats link that's on the first page of the conference website.
Cool. And if you're not sure of your 6-digit GCNO, it should be on your apportionment letters that you received from the conference, or let me know, ask one of us and we can look up what your 6-digit number is to access the system. Right. Let's see. All right. Now, what's different now in AC Stats, though, is once you log in, it's going to ask you to set up a user account for yourself. So this is good because then once you're logged in, you can have multiple users for your local church. All right. So when you log in, if you're the pastor, you're going to use one of those two methods, and then you're going to have to log in your information. It'll ask you who you are and what your position is. So the pastor might set up a user account. The church administrator might set up a user account. And so then what happens is when you use one of those two methods, when you log in, it's then going to ask you, which of these users are you? And if you're not on that list, it's going to ask you to set up a new user account, right? And then the way I understand it is you're either setting up your own personal username and password, or you'll use one of those other methods. And every time you log in with one of those generic, your GCNO password, then it'll ask you to log in as your personal user information. Okay. So the first time login, you'll use one of these two methods, and you'll have to set up your own personal user account based on your position in the church. And then after that, you will use either that personal username and login, or you'll use one of those other methods, and each time you'll have to select which position you want to list. Okay. All right. Once you log in, AC Stats is going to ask the same questions that Ezra did. None of that's really changing. It's I'm really thinking about how this looks different. Things are going to be in new positions, but for the most part, you're going to be following the same process you did in prior years. Okay. But when you first log in, there's really two pages that you'll see as a local church user. You'll either see local church details, or you'll see annual statistics. Those are the two menus up at the top. This page is what church details looks like. And these are the details that the GCFA, what they have on file for your church, right? And I don't think you can make changes to this page, but even if you could, data that's entered here does not go to Nashville and change their data set. So even if you could make changes to this page, whenever GCFA updates things, they'll override your data here. So from what I understand,
they are not able to update this information on the screen. I would also add a caution that we know that GCFA has not had the opportunity yet to update all of our new appointments. And so your pastor name may not be correct, but don't panic. We know who your pastor is.
And after you submit your data, there's also a page that asks you for information. So you will be able to enter in the pastor's information there and some contact information. I don't know if that's just going to go to us in Wisconsin or if it will actually pass up to the general conference. And that's where I'm saying we're still learning how that's going to be moving around. Okay, there's definitely it's going to ask you to update information. I'm not sure if it actually will change the main database in GCFA. Okay, does that sort of make sense, Sarah, Lisa, what I'm saying? All right.
As Lisa said, we do know that GCFA is still making some updates on their side and testing it. It's not completely right yet. Eventually, they are using the same software that we are using, which is Brick River, and AC Stats is kind of built on top of it. But we're hoping as the years go by, there will be a lot more efficiency and more correct data that we can count on. But if there is a problem, just let one of us know.
All right, so this is the local church detail menu. If you clicked on annual statistics, this is what the page would look like, right? And this is where I would suggest logging in right away and printing out a blank form. So in the middle of the screen, you can print a blank report, and it should show you the values that were entered in 2021 and then having blank spaces for 2022. I'd suggest printing that out, working on it with the other people from your church that are compiling the data, and then coming back and entering it later. All right. So if you scroll down this page, then you'll start seeing actual questions listed. All right. So you'll see table 1, 2, and 3 are all on one page now. You know, the old system, they were actually different sites. Now they're all together. I'm wondering even if we're going to continue calling them table 1, 2, and 3, if they're all just scrolled together on the same screen. But those tables focus on 3 different things: membership and participation at the beginning, church assets and expenses in the middle, and then church income on table 3 or towards the end. All right. So as you're scrolling through the questions, I want to talk about some best practices that church users have said works for them. As I said already, you want to use a blank form to gather your information. Most people like doing that. The next thing is, as you're going through this, you're going to get errors and warnings, all right? And so I'm showing you right now what the questions for the budget and spending plan is, question 52, all right? And this is one of the special questions that's actually a total. So when you've entered in the 7 boxes on the right there, they have to add up to the total at the bottom, right? And so if it doesn't add up, it's going to be an error. And you're not allowed to submit your stats unless all of your errors are changed, right? Now, an error is different than a warning. A warning is any time we've set up some checks in the system, such as any time that there's more than a 75% change in a prior year's number. All right, so you can look at the bottom of the screen here. You know, we've entered 0 in. I mean, we didn't enter it. There's currently nothing entered in yet. So because that's more than a 75% change from the previous year, we would have to provide an explanation. And if you don't provide an explanation, you can't submit the data. All right, and the explanation doesn't have to be very elaborate, just giving some brief reason for why the numbers have changed. So you'll receive a warning usually if the change has been more than 75%, and also if it was 0 the prior year and is now not 0, or it was not 0 before and has switched to 0 this year. And again, explanations can be pretty simple. For the past couple of years, we've gotten a lot of explanations that were just COVID. You know, why is there no vacation Bible school this year, but there was last year? Well, because of COVID. And then the next year when it was instated, you know, why was it go from 0 to non-zero? Because of COVID, you know. However, these warnings sometimes are also very helpful. Last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we had a church tell us in their operating expenses, they had installed a new handicap accessible elevator of some sort, and it was a major expense, and they had put it on the wrong line. But because they put it in their explanation, when we were going through all the warnings and the errors, we found that explanation, realized they put it on the wrong line. It was going to affect their apportionments greatly, but because we were able to catch it and correct it, it saved us a lot of work on the back end when we were actually doing the apportionment calculations, right? So the warnings are very helpful to us, but also potentially could be, the comments on the warnings can be very helpful to us, but they can also be very helpful to your individual church as well. Right. Next thing I want to talk about is in previous years, the apportionments and special giving that we send directly to Sun Prairie, those questions we ask church, and we don't want local churches to enter those numbers. We already know what those numbers are based on the collections, based on those numbers were already sent to the treasurer's office. So in prior years, we hid those questions so that you couldn't enter them. This year, what we're going to try to do instead is put the numbers in there now, so that when you're going through the data, you can check to see if we have the correct numbers for you. So we haven't entered them right now, but where those gray rectangles are on the screen, they should have the actual numbers for your church once we've uploaded that file ourselves, right? So again, these sections, any number, any value that any donations that your church made that were sent directly to Sun Prairie, they should be entered in these gray boxes when you're in the system. They should be pre-filled in, right? If they're incorrect, please let us know so that we can make changes to them, all right? So we're sharing them ahead of time so that you'll be able to check them and let us know if something looks wrong. Sarah, does that sound right, what I'm saying? I feel like I talked around that a lot.
No, I think that's very good. I did have one question that came in. He tried to print out a blank report and it didn't print out right. And that is true. It'll print out continuously rather than in 3 separate tables. And we have reported that to GCFA and they have told us they're going to work on it, but it will come out continuously. So you'll get it all together.
Yeah, it's just printing out the page as opposed to a nice PDF that's well formatted. So hopefully that'll be an update in future versions. All right. Finally, when you're done entering all your data, the system's automatically saving it as you're working in the system. But when you're done, you do have to submit it. And that's the way that we know that you're done. All right. It's possible that, 2 people might be entering all of their data into AC stats and they're waiting for a 3rd person to enter in, 1 or 2 lines. We don't know that your church is done until someone at your church hits the submit button. That's how we know that your church is done with all of its activity. All right. So please, when you're done, please hit submit. All right. And not earlier than that though. All right. Once you hit submit, the way I understand it is that then there will be a screen that asks for, that shares some of your church details, specifically like pastor's email address, church's email address. If you have that information, please fill that in. I think there's also a section for you to just enter any overall notes about the stats that you've submitted. Again, this is the first year we're going through this, so I don't know exactly what that will look like. But that's what I anticipate to happen when you're submitting your data. All right, lastly, I want to go through some common questions that we hear every year. And if you've done this training with us before, you've probably heard these common situations, but let's talk about these right now. If you have multiple churches in one charge, all right, there's always a question of like, how do we split, these costs that 2 churches are sharing? The main idea here is you don't want to enter a number in AC stats more than once, okay? So for example, if 2 churches are sharing a pastor, all right, total the pastor is going to be paid $25,000 by First UMC and Wesley UMC. The agreement is that First will be paying $10,000, Wesley will be paying $15,000. But First Church sends $10,000 directly to Wesley, and then Wesley pays the pastor directly with 1 check, right? If that's the case, we want to mark the pastor's compensation to be $10,000 on First Church's stats and $15,000 on Wesley's church's stats, so that the two churches together add up to the total $25,000 salary, right? Also, that $10,000 that Wesley received from First isn't part of its income, so that should not be entered anywhere in the stats as income for Wesley. Okay. And that works for other things that might be shared between churches too. All right, a second question we often deal with are major repairs. And the idea here is that we're really looking for what a typical year's expenses are on lines 39 through 47. Those are the lines that we use for the apportionment calculation. And this is versus one-time major repairs, one-time projects. Those get listed on line 49. And because they're not part of a typical year, they're not part of your apportionment payment. So that's the big difference there, is you have to ask yourself, is this a typical repair for that happens, or just something that, you know, once in a while happens? All right. So for example, if you've got regular maintenance on your furnace, every year they come and service the furnace, you know, $400 a year, it just happens regularly. That's part of your operating expenses on line 47. If you're going to replace the furnace every 20 years or something, the year that you replace the furnace and pay that large bill, you know, that's going to happen on line 49. If you
Don?
Yes.
What about if you have the church painted? That's like a 1 in 10 year frequency.
I would say that's not a typical maintenance thing. If you're the kind of I've got friends that I feel like paint their house every year. Like if that's typical, then I would say like that's part of your operating costs. But if it's a once in a 10-year project, I would say that's a line 49.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And then example 2, dealing with insurance. Let's say a tree falls on your roof and it costs $15,000 to replace the roof. The insurance pays $12,000. That $12,000 is not income, and it shouldn't be entered anywhere in our stats. And because the church had to cover that $3,000 difference to replace the roof and the $12,000 they received from the insurance, that $3,000 is part of that one-time project, and that would go on line 49. Okay. Any other questions on this? All right. Another common situation, I've already talked about this a little, but lines 28 through 36, why are they not able to be edited? These are specifically the apportionments and the donations that went directly to the conference. All right. These are going to be uploaded directly from our records. All right. And the purpose of that is we're trying to reduce the amount of human, the possibility of human error by having everyone keying that information. Again, if we can just upload our files, there will be fewer errors. However, if our files have a mistake in them, we need to know that so that we can then go and update our files. So if you see something that you need to change, please contact the team in Sun Prairie. And then the other situation for us to talk about is donations to other organizations and projects. All right. And this definitely becomes a discussion, and you end up asking a lot more questions amongst people about, like, no, really, what's the purpose behind this project? So you have to ask yourself, is this project part of your ministry? Is it part of your operating costs? So for example, if you've got a garden and that garden, garden in your church lot is like part of your ministry, and you talk about like, this is our garden, this is what it's part of our operating expenses, that you're going to put on, however you receive the money to operate it, you're going to put that on its regular giving lines, lines 52A through C, or maybe you have fundraisers for it, that's going to be, in lines 53. And then your expenses are either going to be in lines 46 or 47, either part of programming expenses or part of the operating expenses. You know, with a garden example, you know, you have a kickoff party, that's sort of programming, but paying for the water bill, paying for the tools for that garden, that's going to be line 47, the operating expenses. Now, perhaps your project is separate from your organization. We're part of a gardening project that's not within our church. We're part of a team with other organizations. Any giving that's going towards that, you know, and the church is sort of a pass through, we enter that, whatever giving, however it came in, was it part of pledged giving? Was it part of a fundraiser? That'll be part of the income where we enter it there. Perhaps it was part of a special collection. That would be on line 53D, right? And then the expenses, you know, the money that we actually use for that project, we have to decide whether or not that project or organization is Methodist-based or non-Methodist based, and that'll be lines 37, 38. This reminds me of line 37, these Methodist organizations. Again, if the treasurer's office already knows about that donation, you won't enter it on line 37, okay? So if your church sent money to UMCOR, if you wrote a check and sent it directly to UMCOR, the treasurer's office doesn't know about it, so you're going to have to enter it on line 37. If, however, you collected money for UMCOR and sent the church to the treasurer's office for them to pass it along to UMCOR, you don't have to tell the treasurer's office about that. You know, they already have that recorded. Okay, so that's how we end up using line 37. You have to ask yourself, does Sun Prairie know about this donation or not? Because we do want to know about them. And if you haven't told Sun Prairie yet, please let it be known on lines 37 and line 38 for non-Methodist organizations.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
My question is, if you received a grant toward a project that you do within your church, our church does a Beds from Christ program, and we received a nice grant this year.
Yep.
That's income, and then our operating costs would go in 46 and 47 for that?
Probably.
Okay.
There's a line in line 54, there's a place for grants. So that
Okay.
would be marked in there somewhere.
Okay,
And then you'd have to ask yourself, you know, is it a program or is it an operating expense for
Mhm.
whether it's not 46 or 47?
okay, thanks.
Anything else? Because I think that's my next slide for any other questions that are out there. I'm always worried because the larger the group, usually the fewer the questions. So when I saw a large registration today, I thought, oh, it's probably going to be a quiet group.
So how about solar projects? You mentioned grants. There's grants available for that, and Wisconsin, the electric company portion, and then the sponsor portion. How is that handled?
That's a good question, but I think there's only one line for Methodist grants versus non-Methodist grants. So I'm guessing probably all of that money would be non-Methodist grants. And I forget, it's like 54B or 54C or something like that.
And
Thank
then
you.
in terms of where do you put the expenditure, because it's a capital expenditure, it would be on line at 49.
49.
Mhm.
I have a question.
Yep.
I'm wondering, when will you fill in the ones for the like apportionments and that? Do you have any idea of your time frame?
Right, we're probably going to do it next week. Lisa Adler is on the call, and she's the one that does our apportionment billing and recording. We allowed churches to still give for 2022 up through last Wednesday. And then we've been making final corrections if we found that we had either put it to a wrong church or a church wanted to move things around. We're finalizing that. And as soon as we feel that that's settled, which will probably be Monday or Tuesday, then we'll upload the information.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is, you have to have tables 1, 2, and 3 all done before you submit. You don't submit individually, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and this one, because it's all on one page, you might not even notice when you switch from table 1 to table 2 to table 3. It's all continuous.
sure.
So,
Don, this is Lisa Adler in the finance office. There were a couple of questions in the chat from new
Yeah.
treasurers who missed the first part about how to get to where all of this information is in Brick River. Can you go through that again for them?
I'm sorry, which information?
The how to get to it
Oh, yep. So
from the
there's,
very beginning.
so there's two ways. If you are working at the church and have access to the church dashboard, there's a button when you log into the church dashboard to access it. However, if these are new church treasurers, and I'm guessing lay people that don't have access to the dashboard, what you're going to do is go to stats.gcfa.org, and your username is the 6-digit GCNO, the general conference number, and the password that we've set for everyone is stats 2022. And if you're new and you don't know your GCNO, which most people don't, it's either listed on the apportionment letter that you received from the Wisconsin Annual Conference, or you can email me or Sarah or someone in the office, and we can find out your GCNO for you.
I'm going to share my screen for a second.
Just along those lines, if you don't know your GCNO and you want to know, like if you put your name, if you put the request in the chat, I'll look it up and I can send it to you later.
Okay, can you see?
Yep, we can see the dashboard.
You
from
can see the dashboard now.
Yep.
So usually it's the SPRC and the pastors, possibly the office managers, that can get into the dashboard. And you can see up here in the right, auto log into your GCFA AC stats. So if you have access to this dashboard, that is how you can get to it. A second way, or a third way, is that on this, these move, so you got to catch it, but it'll be on this moving, and you have to click on the blue part underneath that says AC stats, and then it'll take you to the login screen. And this is where you would put your 6-digit GCFA number and stats 2022. So that's probably the easier way than typing in the full thing, but that's the two ways that you can get to it. And Don, we can go back to you, your screen there.
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Our church has become very small, and we have another congregation that is operating in our building. Our funds have been combined, although paperwork is separate for it. The new congregation that is using our building is not yet chartered. So will they need to be filling out these forms? We combine we use the same pastor. So we combine our congregations for paying his salary, but will they be filling out this paperwork, or will it all come to our chartered congregation?
If they're not chartered yet, they don't have any place to enter it. So my understanding is that you would be entering it, you'd be entering everyone's together under your number.
Okay.
If maybe not, if they already have one set up. We have some churches that have been around for multiple years, and so they're not brand new, and they have, we do like to separate out the cost if you can, because that helps us again see how many churches we have, what it cost for a startup, and then those startup costs are not included in your church, so it won't affect your calculation of apportionment. So if they have a GCFA number assigned already, then we would like for their portion to be reported under their number and your portion to be reported under yours.
Okay, so then which congregation would the pastor's salary be under?
Do you have it split like a 90-10 or 60-40?
No.
No, how do they?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that would be the question. If your church is entirely, if your congregation is entirely responsible for paying for the salary, then it would go under yours. If the new startup congregation has to pay a percentage of the salary, then that part would go under theirs.
Okay.
And so if you have specific questions, maybe that's one where you might need to call me, or you might need to just look up what the documentation or agreement that you have with that new church startup, because we have different agreements in place about what you're necessarily providing at different stages of a startup's life. There are various stages that they go through where they take on more responsibility and start picking up more cost.
All right, thank you.
I want to reinforce a couple of things. We had the question about, can you go in and out, or do you have to do it all at one time? And the system will save the data, or you can hit the save, and then you can come in and out as much as you want. Although Don did recommend that you print out the blank form, do as much of it off as you can, and then come in and do it one time, makes it easier. And then hit the submit when you're finally ready. We did have a couple of churches last year when we went to contact them. They were disappointed that they were on the outstanding list because they'd finished it on time, but they didn't hit that final submit button. So don't forget that. And just reinforce that if you are in a charge where you have 2 or more churches, make sure you talk to the other treasurer and that you make sure that you are each reporting the proper amount of your pastor's payroll and benefits. Because the common questions that Don went through are really the ones where we have the most problems, where people will contact me next fall after they get their apportionment for the subsequent year and says, you've got something wrong. And it is usually because the salaries have been reported incorrectly between the churches, or you've done something major like a solar panel and put it in your operating expenses rather than capital expenses. Those are the 2 biggest ones that we see that are a problem.
So finally, in summary, if you've got more questions or questions come up, here's my email address again. The deadline is Tuesday, February 28th. Please set some earlier internal deadlines for your team. And if you're not sure of something and you haven't asked us, put it in the comments. You can enter a comment whenever you're entering, I think, any information in here. Enter a comment and we'll look at that when I'm examining all the values before I submit it.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
Not regarding the statistical report itself, but on the dashboard, when we go in, we are still linked. This is Aliva Pleasant Valley, still linked with Augusta, and we're not. It should be Hope United. Who do I talk to about that? Hope United Methodist in Eau Claire.
Marilyn, can you repeat that?
Yes. When I went in to the dashboard, and I got in fine, but the 2 churches that show there are Aliva Pleasant Valley and Augusta UMC. And we are no longer linked with Augusta. We're linked with Hope United Methodist in Eau Claire.
All right.
This might be an issue for our pastor more than me, you know, because I can get in and do the statistics for Aliva Pleasant Valley.
Okay, I'll take a look at that one, Marilyn. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about differentiating between using a ministry that's part of your ministry or something that's separate from your organization. You're talking about when the church is giving money. For example, Sleep in Heavenly Peace or Crop Walk. Would that monies that are used would that be considered separate from our organization, or it's really part of our ministry?
I would say, like, if you're sending money to the Crop Walk, that you would be entering it under donations to non-Methodist organizations.
Okay.
And what was the other?
Well, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, it's a similar kind of nationwide entity that some churches are involved with.
That sounds like you're giving money to an organization outside of your church. It's definitely ministry, but it's not like a ministry that you are organizing. So it's a donation that you're sending outside of your organization.
So if it's a ministry that's basically our own church doing it, like we have a ministry that's involved after school on Wednesdays, that would be our church. But if we contribute to this other organization, even though we started it but it's a part of a nationwide thing, Sleep in Heavenly Peace, that would be for the non-Methodist other organization.
Yeah, and that was the same situation we had with a garden that we had started on our property, but eventually was taken over by a larger organization. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Someone had asked about in the chat, can you print out the information prior to submitting it? When you print out that blank report, I don't know if you've already entered information in it, if it would print out those numbers or not. That's a good question. I think we're not going to find out till we test that out a couple times. So
I do encourage, if you have any problems as you go along, please let us know. And we'll try to get out information to other people as well so that they are aware of what those problems are. This is the first year that it's being done by all 54 conferences. Last year, there was only one conference that tested it out. Anything else? Any other questions that anybody has or anything that you saw in the chat box that we didn't follow up on? Okay, I'm going to repeat just a summary. There are 3 ways to get on. If you have access to the dashboard, that's going to be the easiest way, or you can go to the conference website to get on. Your password, your login is going to be your 6-digit GCFA number, and the password is stats 2022. When you go in, you can add additional people. You can print out a blank form and work with it. When you are completely done, I'll step back. If there are any warnings, please answer them. Don, do you remember how many warnings you worked through last year? Wasn't it something like 13,000 or it was
yeah, it was something like that.
It was an incredible amount. And so if you don't write something in there and there's a major difference, then Don needs to follow up with you. But if you can type in an explanation in there and it makes sense to us, then he can keep going on to the next 100 or 200 or 300 that he has to take a look at. So that's why he has a 2-month time frame in there from the February 28th deadline that churches have to the April deadline that he has to get it in, is because he's looking through all 450 churches and trying to make sense of any major differences or warnings that we have, because we can't submit it with those. Okay.
Sarah, there's a question there. Are we able to print out the final report similarly to printing out your progress? I haven't seen that yet, but I'm not sure if just printing out the blank report, if it's going to show what numbers were actually included. So I think that's something that we're going to be figuring out as we go along.
I think that you can. It would be logical that you can. Sometimes we answer questions that are logical and they don't work out that way, but you should be able to, and if not, let us know. Under the old Ezra report, there was a problem and we can no longer print those reports out, but don't try to go to Ezra. You won't be able to do anything in there at all. Someone asked, we gave gift baskets for a golf outing, no money. How do you report that? The reports are not really set up for gift in kind items. Just like if you had your congregation and they donated items for emergency buckets. We are reporting, currently the system is only for cash type of items. Okay. Again, this is recorded. It will be put on the finance training section of the website along with Don's outline of his presentation here, probably by Monday. And if you have any questions as you go along, you can always reach Don at his email address is in the statistical report, but you can also reach us here in the finance office, and either Lisa Adler or I will be able to answer some of the basic questions. If it's a problem with the new software, we may have to research it and then get back to you. If you leave us an email or a phone number, it's really great if you can give us the city you are in, as well as your church name and how to contact you. I counted out how many First United Methodist churches and Trinities we have, so that is always very helpful so that we can get back to you. One final chance for questions, or Don, do you have anything else?
Nope, but you are completely correct on. Please tell us what city you're from first, and Trinities. I'm always looking those up.
I do have one final question. Who do you recommend sign in? Pastor, treasurer, lay leader, or is there a limit? Or
there's no limit, and it really is church by church who's the best person for it. The participation questions are usually the pastor. But the admin assistant usually has a good idea of that too. The financial ones, it's usually the treasurer. But again, sometimes the pastor knows all of that information better. And then like the assets, it's usually someone from the trustees.
Thank you.
So if the pastor signs in, then the other 3 or 4 people that have the financial information can sign in under his codes?
They would, so the pastor would first sign in with that 6-digit code or with the button on the dashboard, and they would have to set up a personal account.
The
And then
pastor does, or do I?
the pastor does that.
Don,
But-
if the pastor already has access through the dashboard, then he doesn't have to do that logging on. It would
Okay.
take him there without it.
Oh, okay.
But then the other 3 or 4 of us that have the financial information go in under his sign-in codes.
No, you go in under the GCFA number and the stats 2022.
Okay,
And when you log in, though, it's going to say, are you the pastor? It's not going to say, are you the pastor? It's going to say, choose your name from this list. The pastor's name is going to be there, and you're going to create a new account.
okay.
And then if a third person comes along and sees the pastor's name, Natalie's name, and they're going to say, oh, create a new account there.
Okay,
So he
thank
said,
you.
this is something different than before. So it used to be you only had one login and password per church. Now you can have multiple. But to
Wait,
get in
I was going
originally,
to say, you still have the same one login per church, but now you can set up a different account for each
people.
one.
okay.
And
which
how
is-
do I merge reports then to get it all into your major scheme of things?
You don't have to merge it. You're going to see what the prior people already entered.
Okay, perfect.
Someone did ask the question of, this seemed way over my head. It's the first time I've seen it. And if so, please feel free to call in and I'll be happy to walk you through the first time or see if you can get in touch with your former person, because the form is the same. The questions that are being asked are the same. How to gather the information is the same. It's just a different place to log the information into. But gathering the information, you may need to talk to whoever did it before to find out how they brought the information together. And the other thing I'll say is I always dreaded doing this when I was a church treasurer because I thought it was going to be so hard, but it didn't end up being as hard as I thought it was. So give it a try, ask some other people, give us a call. We'd be happy to help. Okay, we'll end now. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Thank you so much for your work in your church. Bye-bye.
You.